Hi, friends. Tony DeWitt here, Missouri appellate attorney and a guy who likes to make the law make sense on YouTube. Here's what we're discussing today. I just happened to see this afternoon, and I wanted to get this out to you as quickly as I can. There's a real problem that arose in the Hannah Gutierrez-Reed case, at least for the state, and I want to go over that. But we're going to start listening to the cross-examination of the state's medical examiner on this case.
Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning.
Doctor, I first want to ask you about your classification. Now, you've been doing autopsies, you said, I think, 33,000 or 3,500?
Yes, 3,500.
3,500. How long, how many years have you done autopsies?
I came to the OMI straight out of fellowship in August of 2014.
Okay, so 10 years.
Yes.
And you are very familiar with the classification system, whether it be a homicide or accident, correct?
Yes.
And in this case, you ruled the cause and manner of death to be accident.
Yes.
And in a homicide, your definition you gave was to rule it a homicide, it has to be a volitional act caused by another to cause death, correct?
Yes.
And volitional means purposeful?
No.
What does volitional mean?
Volitional volitional means a voluntary act. It doesn't mean that there is it doesn't always mean there is intent. You don't need intent. So something as simple as pulling a trigger could be the volitional act.
Okay, but in this case, you reviewed reports and you got information, and based on that, your determination was that this was an accident.
Yes.
And when you said accident, I think you described that as what must not be present is intent to cause death.
There should not be intent to cause fear, harm, or death.
Okay.
That's correct.
So in the materials you read and the information you reviewed, you did not find an intent to cause death by anybody.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's important.
And with regard to that classification, that is an official state of New Mexico ruling, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And
Now we
that
get
is
to the
an
important
accident.
stuff.
Yes.
Okay. I know in your notes that you documented the approximate time of the incident was about 13:48. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that is 1:48?
Yes.
Okay. And then you documented that Ms. Hutchins arrived at the hospital approximately 15:20. Is that right?
Yes.
And that is 3:20.
Yes.
Now, that is approximately an hour and a half delay. Is that right?
Yes.
And you knew that she was being attended to by EMT personnel and there was a helicopter waiting to take her to the hospital. Is that right?
Yes.
And do you have any idea why there was a delay in the hospital taking her?
No.
Okay. Now, during your findings, you did a CT scan before your external examination, correct?
Yes.
Did you find evidence of prior medical intervention from Ms. Hutchins?
Yes.
And what was that evidence of medical intervention?
She had been intubated. The intubation was actually in the wrong place. It was in the esophagus. It was removed when she arrived at the hospital, but she was also re-intubated into her esophagus and not into the airway. She had also had surgical intervention. So they had opened up the chest cavities on both sides due to the presence of a gunshot wound. They had also opened up the protective covering surrounding the heart to try to do what they call manual cardiac massage to restart the heart. It's my understanding that she was pulseless upon arrival and non-responsive and not breathing.
Well, that's pretty amazing. And let me tell you why I think it's so amazing. Because any chance that you have now of proving beyond a reasonable doubt that either Hannah Gutierrez-Reed or Alec Baldwin caused the death in this case just went right out the window. And let me explain why. When you do an intubation, and this is something I've probably done 100 of them, what you do is you use a little device called a laryngoscope, and I'll put a picture up here, and it goes into the mouth and you lift up the soft palate and you look down there and you will see two things kind of sticking up like a little V. Those are the vocal cords. And you have to put the endotracheal tube, which is about the size of your little finger, through that hole, and that's what goes down into the lungs, and that's what allows you to ventilate the patient. Well, if for whatever reason you don't get that into the lungs, well, all the squeezing and breathing that you're trying to do for this patient is going into the stomach. And as the stomach distends, and it's going to distend, it reduces the amount of volume that can go into the lungs, assuming the person is still able to breathe on their own. So depending on when that intubation took place, and we know it took place before they left in the helicopter because otherwise, there would be no need to re-intubate her when she got to the hospital. And even then, they managed to re-intubate her in the wrong place in the hospital. So you've got the situation where for the majority of the time that she is being attended to, she is not being effectively ventilated. Well, one of the things that they drill into you in every basic EMT course, every paramedic course, every course associated with respiratory care and nursing it's the ABCs: airway, breathing, circulation, and then sometimes D, definitive therapy. A, B, C. Well, the A is first because without an airway, you don't get to the breathing. And without airway and breathing, it doesn't matter what's circulating in through the bloodstream, because the blood has a very limited ability to carry and deposit oxygen. And all that happens if you don't have good respiration, you don't have good air movement in and out of the lungs, well, then you're not exchanging carbon dioxide. The blood is getting far more acidotic, and it's probably even getting somewhat, I would even almost venture to say, black in color, because it is not getting any oxygen. Even if Hannah Reed was grossly negligent, causation is absent where an intervening cause, in this case, two of them, Alec Baldwin and a negligent EMT, actually caused the death. Baldwin started the process with firing the gun, and the paramedic finished the process by intubating her in the stomach. Now, I'm not taking cheap shots here at the paramedic. It is not negligence to intubate the stomach or to intubate the esophagus. I've done it. It's negligence not to realize it. Now, when you do an intubation, normally what you do is you listen over the right and left lungs with your stethoscope to make sure that you are driving air into those lungs so that you know you've got a good intubation. Once you know you have a good intubation, you tape the tube in place so that it doesn't get displaced. They actually make little carriers, little things that rip around the tube so that it secures it very nicely. And obviously they secured the tube here, but it was in the wrong place. It's not negligent to intubate the esophagus. It's negligent not to recognize it. Because if you don't hear lung sounds here in the top of the right lung, and you don't hear lung sounds here in the top of the left lung, then you listen over the stomach, and what you should hear is something like a flushing sound or a gurgling sound that indicates that air is going into the stomach acid and bubbling up in there. At any rate, if it's going into the stomach, it's not going into the lungs. Causation here is simply absent. If I was the defense attorney at this point, and they may already have this in the bag, the first person in my case in chief would be a medical specialist, probably an ER doctor or a pulmonologist, or maybe even a trauma neurologist, to get in there and say, she might have had a really good chance of surviving, probably did have a good chance of surviving. We'll never know because she wasn't effectively ventilated. It is the failure to ventilate her that should be considered the true cause of her death. Now, that's going to conflict with the opinion of the medical examiner to a certain extent, but the medical examiner said she wasn't the person basically to make that determination. This really throws a huge monkey wrench into the state's case, and by virtue of having that in there, I really think there is a problem here. And if I were the defense counsel at this point, when the state closes its evidence, I would make a motion for a directed verdict because they can't establish causation. This woman had no effective ventilation for an hour and a half. And generally speaking, brain death occurs after 4 to 6 minutes without effective oxygenation. So there you have it. Heavens to Betsy, this really changes the calculus on the Hannah Gutierrez-Reed case. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great day. Do something kind for somebody, and catch me back here at the beach again tomorrow. If you like this video, here are a few others you might try, and don't forget to subscribe. Have a terrific day, guys.